Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Randy. A single phone call at 3 in the morning finally made me see what I'd been ignoring for months. For months, I let my girlfriend take advantage of me because I loved her and I thought we had a future together. But her choices kept chipping away at that dream until there was nothing left. That 3 a.m. call was just the final piece that made everything fall apart, but the cracks had been there for a long time. But when you're in love, you make excuses. You give second chances, then third chances, then you lose count. Here is how I finally stopped making excuses and started standing up for myself, even though it cost me the relationship I thought I wanted. When I first met Madison about a year and a half ago, everything was terrific. She was fun, spontaneous, and always up for something new. When I was with her, I felt more alive than I had in years. We'd go on adventures and do anything we wanted. For the first time in my life, I could actually see myself getting married. I'd never been that guy who thought about weddings or kids or any of that stuff, but with Madison, I couldn't help it. It scared me how much I wanted that future with her, but in a good way, you know? Like I'd finally found the person I was supposed to be with. But here's the thing, there was this one issue that kept eating at me, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it or work around it, it just kept getting worse. Madison enjoys being outside. And I don't mean occasionally going out with friends on a Saturday night. I mean multiple times a week, every single week. Sometimes she'd even go out on a Tuesday or Wednesday because one of her friends was celebrating something or there was some special event. At first, I tried to be cool about it. I didn't want to be that boyfriend who tells his girlfriend what she can and can't do. I figured she was enjoying herself, and I should be supportive and trust her. But as the months went by, it stopped being something I could brush off. The clubbing got more frequent, and it started costing her a lot. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Madison and I fought constantly about the clubbing. I worried about her safety because she was out there multiple nights a week, drinking heavily, in places where literally anything could happen. I worried about her health, too, the way her body was taking a beating from this lifestyle. There was this one time, it was a Tuesday night of all nights, and she went out clubbing. The next morning, she was supposed to go to work, but she was so hungover she could barely function. Her company had had enough of her being unreliable and fired her for missing work. After that, everything changed because she suddenly no longer had her own income. She started depending on me for things she should have been handling herself. She promised me, after getting fired, that she'd cut back on going out, that she'd learned her lesson. I believed her. But guess what? About a week later, she was right back at another club. Then there was a time I tried to sit down and have an honest conversation about our future, about where this relationship was going. And she just brushed me off. She said I was being too serious, that she was having fun while she was still young, like I was some buzzkill for wanting to stop her. And then there was the time she straight up lied to me. She told me she was having a quiet night in with friends, just hanging out at someone's apartment. I later found out she was actually at a bar. Every single argument went the same way. I'd tell her how I felt. She'd get defensive and accuse me of trying to control her life. We'd fight, she'd cry and apologize and promise to change. And then 2 weeks later, we'd be right back where we started. These fights were destroying me from the inside. I kept asking myself if I was being unreasonable. Was I expecting too much? Were my concerns valid? Or was I being controlling, as she said? I'd have these long conversations with myself about whether I could actually marry someone who lived like this, someone whose priorities seemed so different from mine. The thing is, I loved Madison. When she wasn't caught up in this mess, she was terrific, funny, caring, beautiful. But I couldn't ignore what was right in front of me. It felt like a symptom of something more profound, maybe immaturity, maybe irresponsibility. Perhaps we just wanted different things out of life. I started pulling back emotionally because I had to protect myself. Every broken promise hurt, and I couldn't keep setting myself up for that disappointment. I'd been looking at engagement rings online for months, but I never bought one. The future I'd been picturing started to feel less like a plan and more like a dream that would never happen. Then, just days before everything fell apart, we had the most significant argument yet. I sat her down and told her straight up that I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't stay in a relationship where she kept making the same destructive choices over and over. I told her something I'd been holding back, that I'd wanted to marry her, that I'd been seriously thinking about proposing. But her constant clubbing and all the fights it caused had made me doubt everything. I wasn't sure anymore if we were compatible for the long term. I told her I needed to see real change, not just words, but actual change in her behavior, before I could even think about moving forward. At first, she tried to play the victim, acting as if I were the one being unreasonable. But when she saw I wasn't backing down this time, she switched tactics. She promised she understood, that she'd cut back on her night social activities, that she'd prioritize us and our relationship. She said she'd get serious about her life. I wanted so badly to believe her, but I'd heard these same promises before, and they'd never meant anything. So I told her that actions speak louder than words, and I needed to see her actually follow through this time. One Thursday, I just finished working a double shift. I got home late that day, completely wiped out. Earlier that evening, Madison had texted me saying she was heading out to spend time with her friends. When I saw that message, my stomach just dropped. It hadn't even been 2 whole weeks since we'd had that big talk where she promised she'd change. And here she was, already going out to be with friends again. I called her right away. I told her she shouldn't go, reminded her about our conversation, and pointed out that this was precisely what was tearing us apart. She got defensive immediately. She said she was only going to spend time with them, not do anything stupid. She added that she'd already told her friends she was coming, that they were counting on her, and that I needed to stop trying to control her. She always threw the word control at me whenever I tried to set any boundary. We argued back and forth. She said she was going anyway and hung up on me. But more than anything, I felt this sense of resignation wash over me. It hit me right then that Madison was never going to change. Her promises didn't mean anything. I'd been lying to myself, thinking we could build a life together when she clearly wasn't interested in making any fundamental changes. I was too exhausted to deal with it that night, so I decided I'd call her the next day and end things for good. When I got into bed, I felt heartbroken, sure, but I also felt this weird sense of relief. Like a decision I'd been putting off for months had finally been made for me. I fell asleep pretty quickly after that. Then, at 3:17 in the morning, my phone started ringing and jolted me awake. I grabbed my phone and saw Madison's name on the screen. Immediately, I felt this mix of dread and anger in my chest. I answered, and she was talking loudly, almost yelling over the club music blasting in the background. She told me they'd been partying all night. When it was time to pay, everyone's cards got declined. Apparently, all her friends had just assumed someone else would cover everything, and it turned out none of them actually had the money. The club wasn't letting them leave until they paid. The total amount was $2,000. She was demanding that I send her the money through Cash App, Venmo, or whatever. She kept saying it was an emergency, that the club was threatening to call the cops if they didn't pay. I felt this surge of anger go through me, but honestly, I wasn't even surprised. Of course, this happened. I'd warned her not to go, and she went anyway, and now here we were. I felt absolutely nothing but cold resolve. This was it. This was the proof I'd needed that she would never change. She'd keep making these reckless decisions and expect me to fix everything for her. I told her, call your dad. That's all I said. She immediately started protesting, saying her dad wouldn't pick up, that she couldn't call him, that I was being cruel and heartless, that this would ruin everything between us. I just repeated myself. Call your dad. I warned you not to go. I told you what would happen if you kept doing this. This is your consequence, not mine. Call your dad. She started screaming at me then, calling me every name she could think of, saying I was proving I never really loved her. And you know what? I was done. I said, you're right. I can't love someone who refuses to respect me or our relationship. We're done. Call your dad. I hung up before she could say anything else. I turned my phone completely off and got back into bed. I'm not going to lie, I didn't fall asleep right away. I just lay there in the dark for a while, and I could feel this weight lifting off my shoulders. Was I sad? Yeah, of course. But more than anything, I felt relieved. I'd finally done what I should have done months ago. After a while, the exhaustion caught up with me, and I fell asleep. I woke up around 9 the next morning feeling groggy as hell. But there was something different about how I felt. I reached over and turned my phone back on, and within seconds it started buzzing like crazy. Notifications just kept popping up one after another. I had dozens of voicemails and texts from Madison, a bunch more from her friends. I started scrolling through everything. Madison's texts were all over the place. Some of them were angry, calling me every name you can think of. Others were desperate, begging me to call her back. Then there were the really nasty ones where she blamed me for ruining her entire life. Her friends weren't any better. They were calling me a terrible boyfriend, saying I should be ashamed of myself for leaving her stranded like that. I sat there reading through all of it, and honestly, I just felt numb. Part of me expected this kind of reaction, but seeing it all laid out like that was still pretty intense. Then I saw the voicemail from that unknown number, and my blood went cold. I pressed play, and it was a police officer from the local precinct asking me to call back about an incident involving Madison. My mind immediately started racing. What happened to her? Did the club actually call the cops? Was she hurt? Was she in jail? Look, I know I'd ended things with her just a few hours before, but I still cared about whether she was safe or not. I didn't want anything terrible to have happened to her. I called the number back right away, and the officer's confirmation that everything between us was done for good confirmed that. The officer explained that Madison and her friends had been arrested early that morning. When they couldn't pay their bill at the club, management called the police. But it didn't stop there. The situation got way worse. When the cops showed up, Madison was apparently drunk and started acting crazy. She was yelling at everyone, accusing the club of discriminating against her, making all kinds of threats. When the officers tried to calm her, she pushed one of them. So now she wasn't just being arrested for not paying her bill. They charged her with disorderly conduct and assaulting a police officer, too. The officer told me he was calling because Madison had me listed as her emergency contact, and she'd been demanding that I come bail her out. I just sat there trying to process what I was hearing. It felt unreal, like I was in some bad dream. Part of me couldn't believe that the woman I'd almost proposed to was sitting in a jail cell for assaulting a cop. But another part of me wasn't surprised at all. This was precisely what I'd been warning her about for months. This was the natural result of her reckless behavior, and now she was finally facing real consequences. I asked the officer a bunch of questions about what the charges meant, what would happen to her next, and whether she was okay, or if anyone had hurt her. He told me she was fine, just sitting in a holding cell, and that she'd go before a judge later that day. Then came the question I knew was coming. The officer asked if I'd be coming down to post bail for her. I took a deep breath and told him no. I explained that Madison and I had broken up, that she had family who could help her, and that I wouldn't be posting her bail. There was this brief silence on the other end of the line, and I could tell the officer was surprised. But he just said he understood and that he'd let Madison know. Before we hung up, I also asked him to remove me as her emergency contact since we weren't together anymore. When I ended that call, I knew there was no going back. Everything was truly over. After I hung up with the police that morning, I thought I'd have some peace to process everything. I was wrong. Less than an hour later, my phone rang again. It was Madison's father. The police must have called him, too, since I told them to remove me as her emergency contact. The moment I answered, he started yelling at me. He called me worthless, said I was a terrible boyfriend, and accused me of abandoning his daughter when she needed me most. He went on and on about how I should have been there for her, how I should have sent the money, how this was all my fault. I let him finish his rant, and then I calmly told him everything. I explained how Madison had been clubbing constantly for months, how I'd warned her over and over again, how we'd fought about it endlessly, and how she'd promised to change but never did. I told him that I'd specifically warned her not to go out that night, that we'd argued about it, and that she went anyway. I even told him something I'd never shared with Madison, that I'd been planning to propose to her, but her lifestyle made me realize we couldn't build a future together. I said Madison needed to deal with the consequences of her own choices, and that's why I wasn't sending money or posting bail. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. Maybe he understood what I was saying, or perhaps he didn't want to talk anymore. Either way, he hung up without another word. I found out later that he did bail her out, but he made her sit in that cell for most of the day first. He wanted her to think about what she'd done. I never talked to Madison again after that night. She texted me once she got out of jail. It was a long message, probably written in a rush, jumping from one thought to another. Parts of it were apologies, saying she was sorry and that she messed up. Other parts blamed me for everything, saying that if I'd just sent the money, none of this would have happened. She said I ruined her life by refusing to help her. That line made me angry because it proved she still didn't get it. I had been serious. I'd told her how I felt about her clubbing hundreds of times. I'd warned her that it was destroying our relationship. She knew, but she didn't care enough to change until it was too late. I didn't want to leave things messy, so I sent her one last text. I kept it simple. I wrote, "You knew how serious I was. I told you countless times. I warned you. You chose clubbing over our relationship every single time. I hope you get the help you need, but I can't be part of your life anymore." After I sent that, I blocked her number and blocked her on every social media platform I could think of. I needed a clean break, and I knew if I left any way for her to contact me, she'd keep trying. Over the next few weeks, I started hearing things through mutual friends. Madison took a plea deal and pleaded guilty to the charges. She was placed on probation and had to complete community service. The assault charge against the police officer got dropped because the officer didn't want to press charges. He probably figured she was just drunk and stupid, not actually dangerous. I also heard that her relationship with her father was still rocky, but she'd moved back in with him and was supposedly trying to get her life together. I don't know if that's true. Our mutual friends were split on what I'd done. Some of them thought I was cold and heartless. They said I should have helped her, especially since she got arrested. They acted like I was the bad guy for not bailing her out. Other friends told me I did the right thing. They said I'd set boundaries and stuck to them, and that I was lucky I didn't marry someone who lived like that. Honestly, I stopped caring what people thought. They weren't in the relationship. They didn't see what I saw or deal with what I dealt with. The hardest part wasn't dealing with other people's opinions. It was dealing with my own feelings. I went through this weird grieving process after everything ended. I wasn't just sad about losing Madison. I was unhappy about losing the future I'd imagined with her. I'd pictured us getting married, buying a house, maybe having kids one day. I'd thought about what our life would look like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. All of that was gone now, and I had to accept that it was never going to happen. For a while, I constantly second-guessed myself. I kept wondering if I'd made a mistake. I should have been more patient. I should have been more supportive. I should have helped her that night and tried one more time to make things work. But then I think back to that 3 a.m. phone call. I'd remember how she'd gone out after I specifically told her not to. I'd remember how she demanded $2,000 like it was my responsibility to fix her mess. I'd remember the arrest, the charges, the chaos. And I'd realize that her lifestyle was entirely out of control, and nothing I did was going to change that. She had to want to change for herself, and she clearly didn't. Every time I doubted my decision, I'd remind myself of these things, and I'd know I'd made the right choice. It hurt, but it was right. So look, here's what I learned from all of this. The biggest thing was realizing that what someone says doesn't mean anything if their actions tell a different story. Madison could promise me 100 times that she'd change, but if she kept going out every week and ignoring everything I said, those promises were worthless. I spent so long thinking we could build a future together, but you can't make anything with someone who keeps tearing down what you're trying to create. I had to accept that she wasn't going to change, no matter how much I wanted her to. The truth is, I wasn't really in love with Madison. I mean, I thought I was, but looking back, I was in love with whom I hoped she'd become. I kept thinking that if I just stuck it out a little longer and supported her enough, she'd wake up one day and be the person I needed her to be. But that's not how it works. I was in love with a version of her that didn't exist. And you can't marry someone's potential. You have to marry who they actually are, right now, today. And who Madison was. Someone who the nightlife over our relationship every single time. That wasn't someone I could spend my life with. This whole thing changed how I look at relationships now. I pay attention to the warning signs early on, and I don't ignore them anymore. If someone doesn't respect my boundaries after I've made them clear, I'm out. I used to think that walking away meant I didn't love someone enough, or that I was giving up too easily. But sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone go. Let them deal with their own mess. That could be what finally pushes them to change, or it doesn't. Either way, you can't sacrifice yourself trying to save someone who doesn't want to be saved. I do think about Madison sometimes. I wonder if that night changed her, if getting arrested and losing our relationship was the wake-up call she needed. I hope it was. I don't hate her or wish her harm. I just know that I couldn't be the one to fix her. Trying to do that was killing me, draining my bank account, and destroying any chance I had at happiness. She had to face those consequences on her own, and I had to let her. Some of you listening might think I was wrong. I should have sent the money, because I abandoned her when she really needed me. Other people have told me I did the right thing, that I should have left even sooner. I don't know if there's a correct answer. But here's what I do know. If you're in a relationship where you keep having the same fights, where the person keeps doing the same things that hurt you, where you're imagining a future that never seems to get any closer, you need to ask yourself if you're in love with a real person or just an idea. Because you can't marry an idea, you can only marry who someone actually is. And if who they are keeps bringing chaos into your life, if they keep ignoring what you say and expecting you to clean up their messes, then no amount of love will fix that. At some point, you have to choose yourself. You have to let them deal with their own consequences, even if it's hard, even if you still care about them. Because that's the only way they'll ever actually change. And it's the only way you'll ever be free to find something better. Thanks for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone out there who's going through something similar.